Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Yes, I am laughing because I'm imagining, I start at every episode. I just try to say one little thing about what's going on in the world. Usually it's bleak, so I started laughing because I imagined having to say something. It feels really bleak right now. It feels like every day, like today, I woke up and I saw the headline that Weinstein's conviction had been overturned. And it's just like, what's tomorrow? Henry Kissinger actually is still alive and he's not dead. Bubonic plague is back and maybe it's more virulent than ever. Supreme Court rules that the poor don't actually own their own organs. I don't know. But here's what I do know. I loved talking to today's guest, and you will love hearing our conversation because my guest today is Chris Black. And if you don't know who Chris is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Toledo, Ohio, TV writer Chris Black went to USC, which eventually led to him working in television. He started on the USA adaptation of Weird Science, and since then has worked on some of the best shows of the last 3 decades, including Desperate Housewives, Ugly Betty, Invincible, Mad Men, Severance, and a personal favorite of mine, Sliders. That is just a small sampling of his CV, though, and currently he co-developed with Matt Fraction and showruns the absolutely wonderful Apple TV show Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, which is coming back for a second season. When Monarch first started a couple months ago, I talked to Matt Fraction without seeing the show because I love Matt's comic work, and I've wanted to have him on the show for years, and I had the opportunity, so I'm like, yes, I'd love to talk to Matt. But now that I've seen the show, I was like, oh, I gotta talk to the other person who's part of this, Chris, because I really like it. And man, what a lovely time I had talking to him. He's just a good dude, and I'm pretty sure we could have talked about literally anything and had a fun hour. But I thought it was really cool getting to hear about USC in the early 80s and just the days of TV writing where a residual check could actually pay for your rent instead of today where a residual check might pay for lunch, maybe? Anyway, I hope you like this episode because Chris is the best. And if you do, and this is your first episode, and you're like, hey, I should check out other episodes of the show. What I like to do here in the beginning is a little recommended if you like. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of episodes of Beginnings out there. Go ahead, just grab one at random if you want. But if you'd like to hear another conversation with someone in the same industry as Chris, well, I got some episodes I can recommend to you, okay? Like I said before, Matt Fraction, who, like I said, co-developed Monarch with Chris. What about Dan Erickson, who created Severance, a show that Chris wrote for? Also, Jane Espenson, longtime writer Buffy and so many other things. Ron D. Moore, creator of Battlestar Galactica, the reboot. Allison Tatlock, great writer, wrote on Better Call Saul. Amy Aniobi, Core Jefferson, just won an Academy Award. Jessica Gao, Terry Winter, creator of Boardwalk Empire, wrote on Sopranos, lots of other stuff. So check out those episodes. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe to the show. You can write a review if you want to. You can also find me on social media, mostly writing jokes on Blue Sky or posting pictures of my animals or my wife on Instagram. But you can find me at Andy Beckerman if you would like. Coming up, 2 amazing episodes. Ben Chasney of 6 Organs of Admittance next week, and Eric Early from the band Blitzen Trapper. Both incredible conversations. So stay tuned for those, but for now, let's talk to Chris. I mean, there's 100 reasons why I want to talk to you, but mostly...
Really? I would be hard-pressed to think of 2 or 3, but go.
Really? Wait, Are you saying that? Okay, now here's where I can really start, if we want to start in with the hard-hitting journalistic questions.
Okay. You fire away. I'm prepared.
Is that false modesty or comedic self-deprecation?
I think there's a third option. Isn't there imposter syndrome? Isn't that the, does that fall into either of those categories? I think people who know me will say I'm probably pretty good at comedic self-deprecation. But I mean, I think I've been doing this now. I got my first full-time writing job in 1995. I've been a member of the Writers Guild now and working in television. I mean, incredibly lucky, to have done it for now almost 30 years. But I'm constantly afraid it's just going to all blow up and go away. It's like,
Really?
I mean, that you're going to get that tap on the shoulder and there's going to be a studio security guard standing there going, aha, we finally figured you out. And you have to stand there while they scrape your parking sticker off your car and they escort you off the lot with your Xerox box full of crap. So.
Okay. Wait, there wasn't like one job you got where you're like, okay, finally I feel secure. Like this, I'm a talented writer. I know I am because I got X job, whatever it is.
Well, I think, not to be falsely modest, I think I am a talented writer. I think I would not be continuing to work in this business as long as I have, without the ability to put it on the page. I mean, I think they talk about, it's all about luck. And yeah, I think there's a huge amount of luck in getting into Hollywood, getting your toe in the door, getting that first job, meeting the right people. It's an incredible amount of luck, but they don't keep hiring you if, just out of self-preservation. A showrunner, a boss isn't going to keep hiring you if you don't make them look good, if you can't do the job, if you can't deliver scripts. So yeah, I'm certainly, I would say, a talented writer, at least a competent writer, but I never feel secure. I could swing my camera around here in my office. There was nothing on my walls. I never settle into anywhere. The very first job I had, I was a staff writer on this USA cable show called Weird Science, based on the John Hughes movie, which to this day is still one of the greatest jobs I ever had, for a number of reasons that we can talk about if you like. But there were two other writers on the show. There was a writing team that they had been hired around the same time I was. And they were in the office right next to mine. We were on the Universal lot, and they moved into their office like it was their college dorm room, hung stuff on the walls. They brought in furniture. They needed like a hand truck. They wheeled in like one of those full-size arcade video games. And then after 8 weeks or 10 weeks, they didn't get picked up. And so I had to sit there in my office and like watch them going back and forth down the hallway, hauling all of that stuff out of their office. And I was like, literally from that moment forward, I was like, I never hang stuff on the walls. If I can't be out of this office in 15 minutes, when the hammer comes down, it's like, and I know it sounds like false modesty, but I mean, I've been fired from plenty of jobs. I mean, it happens. It's a reality of the business for a variety of reasons. I personally don't think any of those firings through incompetence or lack of talent, but it happens. I never feel like I have my footing completely under.
Okay, this resonates with me. You do not want to be a cautionary story. You do not want to be someone else's anecdote, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be the person who has to call their friends to rent a U-Haul to empty their office on the weekend,
Yes, I get that. Okay. Unless your Wikipedia article is wrong, I think we're from the same neck of the woods. You're from Ohio, right?
I am, Northwest Ohio. I was born and raised in Toledo.
I'm from Pennsylvania, and I went to Pitt, so I know that area of, Pitt. The Western PA is a little bit like Ohio, so
I was just there, actually. I took my family. My dad, who is 91, still lives there. I have two brothers there, one in Toledo, one in Cleveland. And we were actually just got back. We went there to see the eclipse because Toledo was in the path of totality. So, which was great fun, and got to see family. And it's my second total solar eclipse, which is just completely transcendent and life-changing. And people listening who haven't seen one, it's, I can't oversell it. It's really amazing. Go see one if you can. But no, my dad's brother, my late uncle, lived in Philly. So we would go every summer. I had cousins there, and we would make the drive because we never flew anywhere. We drove, we all piled in the unair-conditioned Chevrolet station wagon and took that long haul across Ohio and through Pennsylvania, and that endless drive on the Pennsylvania Turnpike to Philly, and would spend a week in the summer in Philly visiting my uncle and cousin. So yeah, I know it well.
Okay, I want to get back to this, but I have another question because I'm curious about this. Again, this feeling of like imposter syndrome. I want to say it's something more than that. But let me ask, how did you get into TV writing in the first place? Was it through elite circles or some other way?
Well, that's the first time. It's probably the first time, and my friends will probably laugh if I refer to them as elite circles. But yeah, I mean, it's through connections, and I mean, how far back do you want to go? I wanted to be in the storytelling business, the movie business, the Hollywood business. I don't know, however you want to characterize it. I went to USC Film School, and my film school buddies, this was in the early 1980s, a couple of iterations of the film school ago, before it was the well-funded, palace, that it is now, when it was still the old rundown stables, that someone had scrawled "reality ends here" over the entrance. I graduated in 1984. I was actually the last class that went through those old original buildings before they tore them down. And a couple of my film school buddies, who I was roommates with, and were my best friends, and still my best friends to this day, were a writing team named Tom Spezialy and Alan Cross. And Alan's retired from the business now, but Tom is still working. I believe he's working on the new Blade Runner show now. And when I graduated from film school, it was sort of the mid 80s, and it was and I did a bunch of crappy jobs. I worked as a delivery truck driver. I was a film projectionist. Then I got into kind of freelance script reading, story analysis. But I wanted to be, the spec feature sale was big. Like, two other guys I had gone to film school with, Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, had sold this script called Problem Child for like $1 million. And so we all were like,
hold on, sorry, stop 1 second. The script for Problem Child was $1 million script.
Well, if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but this was my recollection, and you could ask Scott or Larry about it. But my recollection is it was like a big $1 million spec sale. I could have the numbers wrong, but it was one of those aspirational figures, And then Shane Black sold Lethal Weapon, and
right.
There was the spec feature market was super hot, and so everybody was like, well, I'm going to sell my $1 million feature script, and so I wrote a lot of really embarrassingly crappy kind of Shane Black knockoff. And the thing I discovered about trying to write Shane Black is that the reason Shane Black is because he can write like Shane Black. Mm-hmm. It's like he's incredibly talented and good at what he does, and speaking in that voice. And
wait, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
Do you think you had a voice then? Do you think you had some? Okay. So
no.
You're still just like kind of trying to figure things out.
I was trying to figure things out. I was trying to copy things. And to this day, I still love Shane Black's writing. And there's a snarkiness to it and an edge to it, and
for sure
a sort of a side eye to it that I sort of try to bring even to Monarch now, that I try to bring to my writing. But
I could see that.
Oh, well, thank you. I think it's a compliment. But that I was trying to sell a feature script for $1 million, and wrote a lot of crappy scripts that no one wanted to buy for $10, let alone $1 million. And at the time, Tom and Alan had started working in television, and they were working on this Fox show called Parker Lewis Can't Lose.
Yeah, I know that very well.
Which was a single camera, half-hour comedy, very kind of stylized, very filmic.
Corin Nemec.
Abe Ben-Ruby. I'm trying to remember who else was in it. It was really funny. It was a really good show, based kind of stylistically on Phil Joanno's 3 O'Clock High, which I had known Phil. Phil also went to film school with us, and I had worked on his big senior film project, The Last Chance Dance, that got him all the attention, that got him to Amblin and got him the Amazing Stories, and kind of launched his career. But so Tom and Alan, I digress. Tom and Alan were working in TV, and they kept kind of hammering me, do TV. It's like being back in film school. They give us, I remember, I can't remember if it was Tom or Alan, saying they give us $500,000 a week to make a student film, which was like what working on Parker was like. And I resisted. I was still trying to be a feature snob, like, oh no, I'm gonna sell my big feature sale. And then they left Parker ended, and they were running Weird Science. And they finally kind of convinced me, try TV, do TV. We're having a blast. It's like, we're still in film school here. Come work with us. Come play with us. And I was really lucky. There was another writer on the Weird Science staff who later became one of my dearest friends, who really tragically passed away a year ago from cancer, named Jeff Vlaming. And Jeff had gotten an opportunity to go work on the X-Files. And so he was leaving, and Tom and Alan very graciously said, the X-Files, oh my God, go work on the X-Files. But Jeff had like 8 or 9 weeks left on his contract. And so they said to me, come finish out Jeff's contract. And for them, it was easy, because if I did well, they were helping their college buddy out. And if I didn't, after 8 or 9 weeks, I was gone. And they said they could say, well, we tried. So I went to Weird Science. I started as a staff writer. I was there for 2 seasons, and it was everything they promised me it would be. It was, I have friends who are feature writers, and you might spend 2 years developing on something that never gets made, or you get fired off it and they bring in more writers, or, and doing television, it's like your stuff, you write it, they shoot it, you write it, they shoot it, you write it. And in that sense, they were right. It was like being in film school. And to me, the writing part is not the fun part. The writing part is the work, the fun. I went to film school to be a filmmaker, and I don't direct, but the fun part is making the movie. You're not mailing scripts out to people's homes for them to read. All they see is what's on the screen. So that to me is the end product. That's what's fun about it. Is, after all the kind of excruciating tooth pulling pain and angst and self-doubt of sitting and facing a blank page on your computer screen, you get to go out and play with the cool kids with the big toys and make a movie, And in TV, we got to do that. And I kind of found it home. I also found I loved the collaborative nature of it. I love working in a room. I love being, and that Weird Science writing staff was just a murderer's row of talent. I mean, there's Tom and Alan and Kevin Murphy and Adam Barr and Peter Rocco, Carrie Leiser. It was like you couldn't afford. There's not enough money to put that staff together now. And it was a blast. My first job. It was the first time I'd been paid. Someone was giving me a check to write. My bosses were my 2 college roommates. We were shooting on the Universal lot. And I remember specifically right after they hired me, USA, and I may get the details of this wrong, but the gist of it is correct. USA had picked up the show for 2 seasons, and then there was a regime change at the network, and the new leadership didn't want it anymore, but it was too late. It was bought and paid for. So for 2 years, they just let us do whatever the hell we wanted. They didn't care. They just dumped the show off on Saturday afternoons, and we never got notes. We just went and...
Oh, see, that's one of those mythical first rooms that now you compare everyone else, and you're like...
and I have never reached... and I have never reached that. Like 30 years in the business, I've yet to recapture that moment.
So the reason I asked about the elite circles is because if you had come from... I didn't want to presume, but if you had come from, like, say, friends of mine who like went to, say, Harvard, Yale, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. It feels almost like a fait accompli, right? And there is no imposter syndrome. It is almost like, yes, I went from this elite institution into these kind of elite circles here. Like Naomi, she went to Wesleyan. I remember I went to Pitt and I went to grad school at Temple. Like, we don't have alumni events out here. Yeah, and I remember we went to a Wesleyan alumni event at CAA, right? Where you got to like mingle in these kind of circles. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a whole Wesleyan mafia, my friend Henry Myers went there. I think Joss Whedon went there. Yep. It's like, and there's a Northwestern group. There's like, but I mean, I went to USC, which people would go, oh, well, USC Film School there. You're on the glide path to Hollywood. But it's not, I was there in the 80s, and I had a great time in film school. I loved going to USC. But what I came away with, which I guess is when you talk about an elite circle, what people come away with now is it wasn't really, I took some great classes, particularly the critical studies and the film history classes, which I loved. but I didn't learn anything in film school that prepared me to be a television showrunner. It was a fraternity. It was about meeting this network of people.
Right.
And I remember being in a class and the professor, I couldn't tell you who it was or which class it was, but saying, George Lucas is not going to reach down and lift you up out of this group and make you, look around this room. The people sitting in this room, the people you're in class with now, those are the people you're going to rise through the ranks together. And you're going to support each other and you're going to give each other's jobs and you're going to help each other. And that is exactly what happened to me.
Was there a filmmaker that you wanted to be? Was there someone you were patterning?
Oh, well, I mean, George Lucas. I mean, it was like
Star Wars. That was the thing.
Star Wars. I mean, look, I'm older. I'm of the generation I saw when Star Wars came out. I think it was the summer of 75. So I was like 12. And, my dad, my sweetheart of a dad, my long-suffering sweetheart of a dad, drove me to the movie theater. I don't know how many times, 15, 20 times that summer. He's like, haven't you seen this movie enough? And I was like, no. And I came out of it's why I went to USC. I came out of that movie theater transformed, going, where did that guy go to school? That's where I'm going to go. And it wasn't until I got to film school that I realized film could be something other than Star Wars, which was an education in and of itself. But that was I guess to quote Bob McKee, that was the inciting incident, of my career.
It's so interesting. I think your generation, whenever I talk to musicians, it is the Beatles on Ed Sullivan or something like that.
Right.
Like a flashpoint. And it happens again and again and again. It is the Beatles on Ed Sullivan that happens to be this kind of like, oh, I can do this.
Right.
And it seems to be also for filmmakers or TV writers, Star Wars is this flashpoint. And it's interesting to me how like monoculture we were at that point. And then it just fractures to where there are no like huge touchstones like that really after 1980 something. I don't know, pick your demarcation line.
Right. Well, it sounds like a cliche and I guess it's been repeated so many times it's become a cliche. Cliches are cliches for a reason, but I remember it vividly. I mean, in that summer, that spring, whenever it was May or whenever the movie came out, going into the show, it was the Showcase Cinema on Secor Road in Toledo, Ohio, which isn't there anymore. And walking out that afternoon, and the world had changed. It was like I knew what I wanted to do. And it sounds silly, but it's my recollection is it's absolutely true.
So then. And this is why I'm always curious about talking to people from my neck of the woods. What were the actual steps? I didn't understand how to do this. I didn't even look. I wasn't even really conscious of my own desires, and I kind of was just like ping ponging between what my parents wanted for me. My parents were first generation, I guess, and so they really wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer, and I didn't want that, but I didn't actually know what I wanted. And it took a long time for me to figure out this is what I wanted to do.
I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to make movies, whatever that means. I was one of those kids, like from Super 8, who's running around in the woods behind his house with a Super 8 film. I mean, that's a generation behind me, but that was me. I was that kid. My buddies, my film school buddies. I was really lucky that I had a high school English teacher, a guy named Mr. Cedor, who taught a film class. He taught like beginning and advanced filmmaking, and it was like how to cut and splice Super 8 film on one of those little cheap, editing devices. And it was the first time I saw Citizen Kane was on a 16 millimeter high school film projector in his class. And I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it. And I think in a weird way, that was a blessing because at the time, like when I applied to USC Film School, I just thought, I didn't realize it was hard to get into. I just assumed that, I had good grades. I was a good student in high school. You apply if you can pay the tuition and you write a letter saying you want to go there and you just go. It was like, it wasn't until after I got in and got out there and people would say, well, what's your major? And I'd say, well, I'm a film production major. And they'd be like, are you really, or are you trying to get in? And it was like, and I was like, no, really, that's, I was in the incoming freshman class that year, which I think was a dozen or 13 people or whatever. And I didn't realize then. I think if I'd known, I might not have done it if I'd known it was hard. I might have been afraid or daunted or intimidated by it if I'd known. If someone had said to me, "Oh, well, you can apply, you're not going to get in," or they only take a dozen people out of thousands, it's like, good luck. I don't know. I think it was just, it was blissful ignorance that that gave me the confidence to do it.
But you had to have, now this is where the puzzle is for me. You had to have enough self-knowledge to know what your desires were, to know existentially what direction you wanted to head in. But not...
Well, I don't know. I guess the one thing I will say, when you're 16, 17, 18 years old, I don't know if anybody existentially knows that much about... I mean, maybe some rare people do.
But I use myself as the base for this, where I was like in the dark until my like mid to late 20s, when I finally figured out what I wanted to do, left grad school and moved to New York to start doing comedy. And it took a whole long digression to figure it out and get there, because I didn't have that self-knowledge. And that's why when I'm like, you were like, well, I know what I want to do, and I'm going to at least go to the school where I can do that. Right. You had that much knowledge at the very least.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, And I think, I mean, from the time I was I was obsessed from an early age with, like, I love science fiction. I love space. I want to be an astronaut, when I was a little kid. I mean, it was like, I was born in the 60s. And I remember, the Apollo program, and the wall of my childhood bedroom was, covered with like news clippings. Every time there was a rocket launch, I would cut it out and paste it to my wall. And I was obsessed with space and rockets and science fiction. And, I just devoured, paperback, I guess I don't know if it's the golden age or the silver age, Arthur C. Clarke and Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein and, Larry Niven and all of that. I mean, just I was obsessed with that kind of stuff. I remember, I want to circle back to my parents for a second, but that when 2001: A Space Odyssey came out, it had a spaceship on the poster. I think it was this beautiful Bob McCall artwork of the Orion going to the orbiting, space station, and I was probably like, I don't know, 6 maybe when that movie came out. And I begged my dad to take me to see it. And my dad, saint that he is, took me to see it. We went downtown Toledo, I think, to the Valentine Theater to see 2001: A Space Odyssey. And we got to the end of that movie, and I turned to my dad and I said, like, what was that? And my dad goes, I don't know, son. But it was like, that was the kind of stuff I wanted to do. But my mom loved movies. My mom was obsessed with the movies, and she, in the 50s was like, she loved like William Castle movies, like The Tingler and The House on Haunted Hill. And she loved horror movies and science fiction. And I think that was where a lot of that came from. And there was I believe out of Detroit, on one of the independent TV stations, there was a horror movie host called Sir Graves Ghastly. And he was kind of like the Count Floyd of, and he would show horror movies and do weird skits and things like that. And he was on in the afternoon, and like I would come home from school and my mom would be, watching these old black and white horror movies like Them and, The Deadly Mantis and all those 50s things. And they scared the crap out of me. My mom dragged me to see Alien in 1979 I didn't want to see it because I was like, I was a little squeamish. I didn't like kind of graphic or gruesome horror, and obviously everyone had heard about the chest burster scene. And I was like, I don't know. And my mom was like, oh no, we're going. And I was like hiding, like I'm like, my mom's like pulling my hands down, like, going, oh my God, it's coming out of his chest. So I mean, it was a lot of that passion and enthusiasm for movies. And she would say things like, the way when we would watch these black and white horror movies on TV, the way she would try to convince me not to be scared, which she would be like, it's not real. There's cameras there, and there's people right out of frame that you can't see, and there's people recording the sound, and there's people with lights and stuff like that. And that's the magic of it. I think consciously or subconsciously, I mean, that kind of filtered into me from a very early age, this idea of the illusion of making movies and tricking people into being scared and tricking people into feeling something, when just right beyond the edge of the frame, it's the real world.
It's a gaffer or something like that.
Exactly. Some guy in cargo shorts, it's like, but and then when I think I appreciate now at the time, I was a kind of a dumb, self-absorbed teenager, but I don't think I appreciated what a sacrifice it was for my parents to send me to California, to send me to film school. It was, USC was expensive then. My dad worked for General Motors, and that they never complained. They never tried to say you should be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. They were like, if this is what you want to do, we'll support it. And I was the oldest. I have two younger brothers. I was the oldest, the first to leave to go to college. And my parents flew me to California and just dropped me off. I look now at I have two teenage daughters, or one who's 20 and one who's 14. And the idea of doing that, of taking them across the country and just dropping them off I would be terrified. And I look back now at my parents what they were willing to sacrifice, both financially, and the risks they were willing to take to support my crazy dream was really extraordinary.
Okay. Where did that come from then? Like, what allowed them to give you the space, especially I would say was it just the time period, like the 70s, where things were a little more, pre-Reagan, a little more open in a certain sense?
Well, it's weird.
Essentially.
Maybe it was like, I don't think we lived in the sort of culture of, I don't want to say a culture of fear, but the helicopter parenting or whatever you want to call it. I think, it again, it sounds like a cliche that I grew up in suburban Toledo, Ohio, where, my brothers and I would get up in the morning, hop on our bikes and just disappear all day. And
same thing for me.
Yeah. And my mom would be, okay, dinner's at 5. Mm-hmm. They didn't know where we were. We literally were gone all day. And so I think there was a sense of, there wasn't the fear that something bad would happen. But also, I moved to California in 1980. LA in 1980 was a much more dangerous place than I think it is now. And USC was not in a particularly good part of town at the time, and I don't know, had they been a little more aware of what it entailed, they would have been so willing to do it. But I think it really was my mom. I think it was my mom who, I think she may have been, I know she was a frustrated storyteller on her own. I think that she had probably had aspirations, maybe to have been a writer. And she was a homemaker her whole life. She was, when she passed away, she and my dad were just shy of their 60th wedding anniversary. And so, that she raised 3 boys and had dinner on the table, and that was what she did. But she had this passion for storytelling and for fantasy and for horror and for the movies. And I think in another time, in another life, she would be doing what I'm doing. And I think she saw that in me and probably convinced my dad. And again, I said it before, my dad is a saint. He's just the greatest guy. I don't come from this. I'm sure you talk to people who have these tortured childhoods. It's like, oh, it was my terrible childhood that made me who I am. I'm so not that guy. But I think it was a lot of her going to my dad. My dad may have been the one who had the reservations about it. And my mom was the one who kind of said, we need to encourage this. We need to support this. If this is his passion, we should let him chase it. And for years, my dad, and to this day, he had one job for his entire life. He worked for General Motors for 30 years. He was an engineer. It was an industrial engineer. He was he didn't work on the assembly line, but it was like the idea that every spring I'm out of work and need to look to a new job, he could never get his head around. Uh-huh. It was like that. So it just ends, and then you're out of work and you got to start over again. And I was like, yeah, if the show doesn't get picked up, yeah. And it was like, I think there was something, even now to this day, just didn't compute with him. Like, how can you live that way?
Yep. Yeah. Same thing for our parents. It is very baffling And my parents are they don't like asking questions because they not in a
they don't want
way.
because they don't want the answers.
They don't want to accidentally stumble upon a landmine, some kind of emotional landmine. So they just figure I'll tell them if I want to tell them something.
Right.
So they don't ask questions. So they're just very baffled about, because I don't want to bring it up. I don't feel like talking about the stuff unless I want them to ask, if that makes sense. I'm like, no, I want you to be interested in what I'm doing.
I think my parents were like, and with all of us, my two brothers and myself, and my brothers, my middle brother is he's retired now, but he was a television producer, and he worked for the local ABC affiliate in Toledo and then later in Houston. He's got regional Emmys. The joke is the Emmy count is my brother 2, me 0, because he's got 2 regional Emmys for local programming he produced. Very successful. And my youngest brother's a firefighter. And I think, my parents, that their attitude was we want them to be happy and successful in life, and no matter what it is they pick. And if it's working for them, we're cool.
I mean, it's almost a leitmotif on this show that at some stage in my guest development, sorry, all the animals just busted into the door, like just busted through the door. And it's almost a leitmotif that my guests will catch a scent. Like they won't know exactly, it won't be overt, but they will catch a scent of parental regret somewhere in their childhood. Something that or if not regret, just like an unfulfilled dream or desire that, again, is not referenced directly, but they kind of just like you glance off an angle of it
right
in your mind.
Yeah, I think that was my mom. I mean, I think my dad, I think I can't be in his head or speak for him, but I think he's very satisfied. I think he had the life he wanted. I think, he I don't know that he loved his job. In fact, I know he didn't love his job, but I think, he was very active. He was a fisherman and he spent time he was a great engaged parent. We took family trips together. He was involved in our lives and Boy Scouts and all, and everything. And I think that things from his point of view, things worked out okay. It was like this. Yeah, I did, I had a good living and I raised a family and I got my boys and they're all happy and married and successful. And I've got grandkids and, it's all good. And I think my mom, and I didn't find this out when you talk about that kind of whiff of regret or maybe sort of a moment of revelation about your parents, is after my mom passed away and my dad was going through sorting through a lot of her stuff, she had gone, after my brothers and I were all up and out of the house, she took some classes, she started to, I think she got a little restless. She traveled, and she took some writing classes at one of the local colleges in the Toledo area. And my dad had given her some of her stuff. And I read it and I was like, this is pretty good. It's like she knew how to write. It wasn't like just like, like Comp 101 term papers and stuff. It's like there's passion behind this, and I think that was a bit of a revelatory moment. Not to say that she was living through me, but that I think maybe it was a sense of he's getting to do maybe whether it was, again, conscious or not, I'm going to encourage him to do this because I didn't get to do it.
How did you find out about USC? Because this is the thing, again, this is all pre-internet. I know that there was that desire in the back of my head. Like Mr. Show was the thing for me. I wanted to be Bob and David, but it didn't occur to me that was a possibility until much later, until I go do UCB stuff in New York. Right.
Right. Well, it was through Star Wars. It was literally, I saw that movie. Who made this movie? I would not have seen, prior to Star Wars, probably not have seen American Graffiti or THX 1138. I didn't know what George Lucas's oeuvre was, but I just saw that movie and I was like, how did this get made? Who made this? And I started reading everything, all the fanzines and everything I could find out about it. I probably still have a box in my attic somewhere of all the old, when it was on the cover of Star Wars was on the cover of Time magazine, or Rolling Stone or whatever it would have been at the time, just reading about this. Like, how did this get made? Who are these people? How did this happen? And there was this guy, George Lucas, who wrote and directed this movie, and he went to the school in California, and I was like, that they're done. That's where I want to go. Well, and it was funny because later, and I still to this day am a passionate Star Wars fan. I mean, it was the Genesis moment for me, and I was very lucky. Later, I did a pilot for TNT that didn't get picked up. We shot it in New Zealand. It was really fun. It was a big Amblin produced it, and Joe Johnston directed it. And the fact that because I bought all the Star Wars crap when, and one of the things that they sold was this thing called the Ballantine Books, which I think had the deal to publish all of the Star Wars stuff. Had this thing called the Joe Johnston Sketchbook, and it had a blue cover, and it had a bunch of sketches of like the Millennium Falcon. And Joe was a lovely guy and was a great collaborator and super fun to work with, and we're still friends. And I was like, would you sign this for me? And he was like, oh my God, you're one of those guys. It's like, it was like, and it was funny to hear him tell the stories because he went to, I think Cal State Long Beach, I'm not sure, but the story's kind of legendary now. He answered an ad on a campus billboard that said artists wanted, and it was at ILM when it was in Van Nuys, and he showed up. And he tells the story. He said, I showed up at the warehouse in Van Nuys, and George Lucas paid me $225 a week to start drawing spaceships. It was like that was the job. But it is, and I don't know if you saw it. It was I think it was on Disney Plus, the ILM documentary.
I haven't yet.
It's really fun, and they're doing a second season of it, but. To me, what was so fascinating about it was those early episodes about how that team at ILM came together. John Dykstra and Joe and Dennis Muren and all those guys, and in this warehouse in Van Nuys, trying to figure out how to do something that had never been done before. It was like, and you see it when you watch Star Wars, and when I watch, it's hard to explain. People think they're like, okay, boomer. When I talk about the experience of seeing Star Wars for the first time, you had never seen anything like that before. I mean, it was like there's a movie called Marooned, which I don't know if you've ever seen, which is about it's I think Gene Hackman's in it, Richard Crenna's in it. I can't remember, but it's like it had won an Academy Award for visual effects, and it's about 3 astronauts trapped in Earth orbit. And if you watch it now, it's like toy spaceships hanging on strings. It's like I could have made that movie, and it won an Oscar for visual effects. And I don't think people realize seeing that theater and seeing that opening shot of the Star Destroyer coming in over your head in a movie theater,
right.
and hearing that booming out over those theater speakers, it was there. Nothing, you had seen nothing like that ever before in a movie theater. It was like I'm trying to come up with what a comp would be. I mean, seeing a color movie for the first time, or hearing a sound movie for the first time, or, when guys ran out of the theater in the silent era because they thought the train was going to come bursting through the screen, or, you know what I mean? I mean, it's hard for me to overstate how transformative an experience that was for me.
Did you have any other competing desires? Was this the first time that something kind of like solidified in you and you're like, I want to do this? Or were there other, I know you said like astronaut before, but like you seem to say that when you were like young, like right? Like it was in
5,
Kuwait
6,
or
7.
something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Was there anything where you're like, I want to do this, and then that got like washed away, like a typhoon knocked away that as soon as you saw Star Wars?
I like to draw. I'm not a particularly good artist. I thought for a while I might be an architect. I like to design things. I liked to put, pencil to paper and draw things and kind of create things. But I don't think I had the talent to have done that if I had pursued that. I mean, maybe I could have been a draftsman or something, but I don't think I ever would have been a particularly successful or talented architect. But it was something creative. I always knew it wanted to be creating something, whether it was visually or, writing or, I don't know. I think that's the only thing I can think of that I seriously thought about well, where could I go to school to learn how to do this, was architecture. But I don't think there was anything really, and again, from a relatively, like junior high school, like 12, 13 years old, we were running around making movies. My dad had a Bell and Howell Super 8 movie camera. And my buddies, my friend Jeff Lohr, my friend Brian Hayes, and I would run around in the woods behind our houses making, post-apocalyptic science fiction movies and, things like that. And so I think, I mean, it took root pretty early.
Do you remember, were you emotionally aware of what was going on in you as you were doing this stuff, as you were making Super 8 films? Or was it just like, I remember making, as I look back, I'm like, oh, right, obviously. Like every time I would have a school project, I would make a film, right? With my friends, we would make stupid films on like our camcorder, right? At night, because we're in the suburbs. There's nothing much to do.
Right.
And I just remember it being so much fun. Like it was all encompassing, the fun. But I don't think I like now, like when I write something, like there's an emotional fulfillment in me. I'm just like, oh, this feels right. And I don't think I was aware of that when I was a kid. And I'm curious because you seem like you were much more self-aware.
I don't know, but I think, well, no, I don't think I was. I don't think maybe am I coming off more self-aware than I was or am. But I think it was very much like what you just said. It was fun. Like when I was in junior high school and high school, I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't particularly social. I wasn't a cool kid or a popular kid. I had my sort of core group of friends. And, I liked theater. I was in speech and theater in high school. And I wasn't a good actor, but it was fun. I liked being in plays. I did that a lot. And so it was the speech and theater nerds were kind of my group. And that was a natural kind of making movies with those people was a kind of a natural extension, but it was fun. It wasn't like, I don't think, and it was a long time ago, I don't think it was feeding some kind of creative need or hunger or that it was somehow tapping into some desire or potential that was emerging from me at the time. I think it was just fun. It was something I could do with my friends. And, like it was just the way you just described it was like, there wasn't much else to do. I wasn't being invited to parties. I wasn't going to football games. And so we would just call each other up and grab our cameras and go out and make movies. It was creatively satisfying, I think, on some level, but I don't think that was the primary driver of it. I think it was something for us to do that we enjoyed doing together.
Uh-huh. Yes. But I think you hit upon something. The other leitmotif of the show is being othered in some way, however that is, whether it's identity or something else. But the fact that I was also the same way, right? I had a good core group of friends, but it wasn't like we would go to football games. It wasn't like we would go to parties. It just was like every once in a while, maybe, but it just wasn't that fun. It was much more fun to sit around and make jokes and goof and make films or whatever else with
go to movies. And that was the other thing too, was there was no, I'm older than you, but there was no VHS market. There was no home video market. We would go to the movies. And if it's another thing I think I talk to my kids about, that the idea that you could see a movie again, it was why I went to see Star Wars 20 times that summer, was because when it leaves, it's gone. It's like maybe at some point years later, it might turn up on TV, but the idea that you could go out and buy it on Blu-ray or stream it didn't exist. It's like, it was like you saw it in the theater, you had the experience, and then a week later it was gone and there was another movie. It was like so we saw a lot of movies. And that was the other thing too, when I first moved to LA in 1980, there were so many second run revival houses all over LA. I mean, the New Art's still there, the New Beverly's still there, but there was the Fox Venice and the Rialto and the Art Theater and the State. And it was like you would get these, the New Beverly still prints them because the format's still exactly the same. The schedule for the month of all the movies. And in my college dorm room, we just had them all pinned up. And we would go see almost every night. We would just go out, whoever had a car. And the double features were like, I remember seeing Godfather 1 and 2 on a double feature at the Fox Venice Theater on a Saturday afternoon. And it would be crazy. It would be stuff. That was where I talk about this kind of film awakening, when I came to LA and realized that movies could be more than just Star Wars. Going to whichever, the New Art or wherever, and it was a Nicholas Roeg double feature of, Performance with The Man Who Fell to Earth, or it would be a Walter Hill double feature of Southern Comfort with The Long Riders, or, it would be like, it was, or it would be Mean Streets with Taxi Driver, or, and it was like, it was suddenly, or Don Siegel, double feature, it would be, Invasion of the Body Snatchers with Dirty Harry, or it was like, and these were these movies that I had never seen and hadn't been exposed to, and suddenly I was just consuming them and learning who these filmmakers were and what their styles were, and just being immersed in it. It really was. It sounds corny. It was a creative awakening, really.
Not corny at all. Absolutely not corny at all. Was there a certain film or a certain director that turned a key in your brain?
It's probably Kubrick. It sounds like a cliche.
Nope.
I think Dr. Strangelove was the first movie that I sat through and then didn't leave my seat and just sat through it again. It's easy to say, but I love all those movies, and I see that I'm trying to think of specific recollections. Dr. Strangelove was one, and another one was Errol Morris. I remember I had the same experience seeing the Thin Blue Line, and sitting through again and watching it and being so blown away that I just stayed in my seat and watched it again in the next screening. Scorsese, I remember the first time I saw Taxi Driver was really transformative. And it was the funny thing too now, those movies are coming up on, like, some of them are half a century old. I'm talking about, the early 80s. These were fairly recent movies. These were movies that had been out, only a few years before. Oh, The Conversation was another one.
Yes. 100%.
I remember seeing The Conversation for the first time and just being kind of numb, like, about how a movie could make you feel, and just being that final scene when he's tearing his apartment apart looking for the microphone, and just sitting there being
saxophone.
Oh my God. And that score is spectacular, and Apocalypse. I was a big Coppola fan too. Apocalypse Now, The Godfather's Conversation, his run of movies in the 70s, again, I'm sure you've had so many people who quote the same stuff, because I'm of the age where it was a sweet spot for me. Bonnie and Clyde, it was like all of those, what were those Easy Rider, Raging Bull movies that, where I was, in 1978, I was 16 years old. So that was like, it was just hitting me.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting and why I really enjoy doing this show after, I'm in the 15th year, is that, okay, so you have those flashpoints, whatever, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, Star Wars, every journey after that, right? It's the emotional and existential and material journey. Like, how do you actually get there? That's different for every single person. I don't know if you know Elliott Kalan. He was the head writer on The Daily Show.
I don't know Elliott, but I was a huge Daily Show fan.
He's great. Elliott's a wonderful person. And he described it like that if entertainment or the creative industry, whatever creative industry you're in, is just like a big castle, right? That has all these windows. Everyone goes into a different window, but it's the same big castle, but it's a different window for every single person.
Everybody swims the moat at a different point.
Right. Yeah. Everyone storms it in a different way. Yeah. So that's what's fascinating. So sure, Star Wars maybe, but like all these different steps are particular to you.
Well, and the funny thing is, and I really cherish it now. I look back now, and this is partly, I think, a function of age, that you start to get nostalgic. You start to look back. I'm really fortunate now that I've worked steadily. I have friends who are now kind of out of the business, who are sort of retired and done, whether they were done with Hollywood or Hollywood was done with them. I consider myself really lucky. I take nothing for granted. It goes back, I guess, circle back to our original conversation about imposter syndrome. I take nothing for granted. The fact that I still have a job, that people still see value in what I can do and the experience I have and the voice that I can bring to something, I appreciate. But and I'll continue doing this as long as they let me. But I have real. My wife rolls her eyes and tells, "Oh, it's the glory days." You're always talking about the glory days, But those were the greatest. That time when you're becoming who you're going to be. That time when you're discovering you're moving out of your parents' house and you're becoming your own person and making the mistakes and learning from those mistakes and meeting the group of people who will be your friends for life and having those experiences, it's the best time of your life, I think, really. I mean, enjoy it, for your younger listeners, enjoy it while it's happening.
I mean, I've been enjoying every stage as I keep going on. I'm just like, all right, this seems pretty fun. This is not every, because I imagine in my future, I'm like, the possibility exists that I could be living in a studio apartment, eating lean cuisines every night, just watching.
That's
TV.
How you start. That's supposed to be how you start your career, not how you end your career.
But I'm saying, I'm like, this is possible. I could end up this sad. And so every day that I'm not that, I celebrate.
Yeah. Well, no, I when jobs are hard, this job is hard. It's like, it's frustrating. You don't get to, you feel, you find your instincts stymied, you find yourself blocked, you work with people you don't like. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, and I was working on Desperate Housewives, and Desperate Housewives was a tough job. It was a very satisfying job. I worked there in the first 2 seasons, and I'm really proud of the work we did.
Yeah, for sure.
It was an extraordinary success and a great experience, but it was really hard. And I remember complaining to my mom about how hard it was and how unhappy I was, and she went, "But you're living your dream." But she was right. What else would I do? That as my dad likes to say, it's a high class problem. It's
right.
It's like what I would not have chosen anything else. And some jobs are harder, and some jobs are easier, and some jobs are more fun, and some jobs are less fun. But what else would I do? I guess
Yeah, you had day jobs, so you knew what it was like. Like, I worked in supermarkets, I worked shelving books in libraries.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I know what that could be. So, so like the worst, that's how I knew that I liked this. Like, the worst job I've had in showbiz was better than the best day job I've ever had in my life.
Well, it's like, what do you see it on you see it on bumper stickers, the worst day fishing is better than the best day at work.
Yeah.
It's like
the worst note I've ever gotten is still like, it's still giving me the opportunity to like figure out like, okay, how do I make this work? Right. How do I figure out how to like square the circle here?
It's allowing you to be creative. And I joke about it. I mean, every day I pull onto a studio lot and there's that moment of tension waiting for the gate arm to go up, and then the gate arm comes up and you drive up. I feel like I should get out of my car and kiss the ground if they let me do it, that I'm still here, and because how many people want to do this? How many people, and to be not falsely humble, but perfectly honest, way more talented than me, undiscovered, out there struggling, haven't made it, would kill for this job, would give their right arm to do what I get to do. And the idea that I would be unappreciative about what I have is insane.
Chris, that seems like a wonderful place to end. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh my God, it was so much fun. And Fraction was right. This was delightful. I hope I got you something worthwhile.
100%. It was really a joy to talk to you. So thanks again.
And please tell your wife that I'm a huge fan.
I will. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.